Hello, gentlemen. Sorry, I had to do that. Hello, gentlemen. This is Nico, and I have with me CS MGTOW. I believe he produces some of the best content that we've had in the community over the past months. And the community has changed for the better, I believe, since he came to the picture. I've left a link in the description for you guys to hit his channel up and watch some of his content. I can't really choose. Most of your videos have been pretty good, man. The latest one was absolutely brilliant. So have a look at that one. And I think there's a lot more content coming up. So with CS today, we will be talking about the upcoming collapse. I mean, a collapse that we talk about in MGTOW all the time, and potential ramifications and all that stuff. Do you want to say hi to all these fuckers who are joining us?
Absolutely. Hi guys. Thanks very much. That's for giving a shout out to my channel, and thanks for the praise. I think it's a very exciting time to be a man going his own way at the moment. There are lots of really great channels out there, including Coltane, Stardust's, of course, yours. So yeah, I'm really enjoying the community at the moment.
Good. And I mean, you wanted to talk about this subject, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Your idea. So let's just I'll let you do a brief introduction to the subject and why you think it's important to talk about this subject.
For sure. I guess my reason for wanting to discuss this is that I've noticed in a lot of comments in my videos, your videos, Turtling and Monkey's videos, that people start to say, well, if we all go our own way and everything collapses, then women will get their comeuppance, kind of thing, that it's going to be the ultimate payback, and it's almost like a kind of revenge fantasy, and I guess what I just see is that a lot of men going their own way harbor very romantic and highly unrealistic ideas of what happens when society is going to melt down. So let's say the governmental system fails or the financial system collapses completely. I mean, we haven't experienced that certainly within our lifetimes. So I guess what I would love to do is to explore the kind of social order that emerges when you have a governmental collapse. How does that impact men? How does that impact women? What tends to happen? Do we still have misandry and male disposability? And we do have a little bit of evidence, some of it anecdotal, some of it in, based on research to guide us here. So yes, I just thought this would be a pretty interesting topic to cover.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I mean, when I hear personally some of the MGTOW that talk specifically about these issues, for example, that they want the society to collapse, it's, a revenge fantasy is the best way to put it. It is as if we will be winning if that situation was to come. And I don't think people are seeing the ultimate consequences that might come from such a thing and what will happen in their lives. And I think you're absolutely spot on that. It's not us winning, is it? I mean, research will tell us otherwise, and as I'm sure you will be quoting some research in a bit, but it's also death that will come at a massive scale as well. And knowing, I mean, the majority of the guys here will know hypergamy. Yeah. They'll be knowing about gynocentrism, and gynocentrism is one aspect that we seem to be forgetting. I think there's almost an illusion that if society was to collapse, people will suddenly look at women and blame them. But that is not really the case. I don't think that's how it's going to happen. I mean, what is your opinion on that?
Exactly, and maybe I can give my own personal experience. When I was in boarding house in Nigeria, for my secondary school, I lived through a number of coups. So we had a democratically elected government in Nigeria. Then we had a military dictatorship, and it was just an incredibly turbulent 4 or 5 year period of time for the country. So for all intents and purposes, we had what one would consider a failed state. It was complete breakdown. I mean, we had rampant inflation. We had, shortages of basic, commodities, food, kerosene, petrol. I mean, it was just absolute insanity. And of course, at the time, I didn't understand anything about, hypergamy and male disposability. But some of the things I began to see in the society suggest men would have an incredibly tough time during a societal collapse. So one example is this. I mean, I went to visit one of my uncles in another town, and I hopped on a bus. And of course, the army had checkpoints absolutely everywhere. They were absolutely armed to the teeth. And what would happen is that they would stop the bus we were in, because at school, I didn't have a driver at school, so I have to hop on a bus. So that they would stop the bus we were in, and then if there was a pretty girl in the bus, the soldiers would instruct the driver not to collect any money from her. So he would have to provide his labor at no cost. And this was something that was totally expected. And of course, the driver was furious because he assumed she would be a paying passenger. Petrol's been rationed at that point, so it's incredibly hard to get petrol. So every single space on that bus has to give him some kind of return. Otherwise, he's going to make a loss on the trip. And the woman would just very, very happily accept the free ride. I mean, he simply had no choice. If he then tried to charge her, she could simply say to another soldier, hey, look, one of your comrades, your colleagues said I wasn't going to pay, and now he's charging me. And the guy will probably just find himself getting shot. Such is the way in my country. But this was the norm. Women were just simply handed stuff, particularly if they were attractive, because a lot of the governmental processes that would protect everybody from abuse, fraud, theft, violence, aggression, simply collapsed. And then it was just pretty much just the rule of, just the basic drivers of the human female, which is hand women free shit and protect them. And that took over very, very quickly. And you saw women got a free ride versus just times of peace and times of stability in the country. And now I can look back at that and I can recognize the kind of basic biological drivers which push us to do that. But at the time, I actually found it amusing. I couldn't understand why she was getting a free ride, I was still a young boy at this time.
Well, I mean, logically, you still shouldn't be able to understand why. I mean, it makes no fucking sense. I mean, for the driver, but I mean, this is one of the things that people seem to be forgetting. It's something that maybe by being in this community for some time, you kind of see gynocentrism and you go against it almost instinctually. Right. Yeah. Even if you see yourself trying to act a bit more gynocentric for whatever reason, then you just stop yourself and you don't do it. Right. We became angry at the state of affairs, at how society is behaving, at how men are behaving, and by extension ourselves were behaving in the past to favor women. I mean, I became angry when I realized how things are and how the favoritism towards women makes men disposable. Makes them like commodities. I think the basis of gynocentrism is what promotes misandry far and wide. And if a collapse was to happen, and I'm not quite sure how a collapse could happen, I think you'll be the best to actually answer that question. You and TFM have good backgrounds when it comes to these things. But if a collapse was to happen, then we'll go back to the rule of the jungle. And in the rule of the jungle, it's what will you earn? I mean, your gift or, whatever you can earn for being that alpha male, that strong man that, has other men obeying him and all that shit. It will be another woman. It will be women, multiple women. And women are going to be seen as prizes.
Absolutely. And also, and I think it is a very, very important point there that if the guys in MGTOW are upset, that what we basically have is a society where women are so pedestalized that they're almost like a prize that you're rewarded with. You know what I mean? Like if you're a good little boy, through life, then you get this amazing goddess, as a gift. that is amplified massively when there, when the kind of traditional police structures and other civilizational structures are set up. I guess there's also, and again, I'm just going to hypothesize here, that a lot of the individuals who fetishize the societal collapse, they assume that things such as forced marriage will come back. So it's that kind of traditionalist in them. Maybe women will go back to their quote unquote natural roles. So forced marriages, sexual slavery, casual rape, forced impregnation. But actually, I mean, the data doesn't support that. I mean, there was a really, really interesting paper published in 2013 by the World Peace Foundation, and what they specifically looked into in the paper were the rates of sexual gender-based violence during and after armed conflict. And one would assume that sexual violence is ubiquitous during armed conflict, and actually that isn't the case. I mean, in the overwhelming majority of the armed conflicts, something like 64% of them, there were very, very little to versus, let's say, a normal functioning society rates of sexual violence. So the data doesn't suggest that women will immediately be forced back by the by the men into, I guess, ceremonial concubinage. It just won't work like that. What may actually happen is that women are protected to the death. So just incredibly violent white knighting comes back, where men will very, very aggressively police one another. And quote unquote disrespect for women will simply not be tolerated, because ultimately, if that guy happens to murder you for saying something he doesn't like, if you say something he doesn't like to a woman, there's nobody to perform an arrest. There's no judicial system that he has to fear. That there's very, very little reprisal. So you'll find actually that the worst aspects of human nature are magnified. People will simply respond to their environment. Violent white knighting, the murder rates will go absolutely through the roof. And a lot of the things that we complain about today will simply be amplified in the absence of a governmental structure. And possibly a lot of it also comes from the fact that, many MGTOW are very, very libertarian leaning. So they somehow see a collapse of the government as a good thing in its own right. And I think that notion really, really needs to be challenged.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you say, like, I don't particularly enjoy governments. I don't particularly enjoy rules, laws, or whatever. You know that about me. I hate everything. I think I can pretty much decide what's good and what's bad. But the situation is, governments are quite useful in a number of things, and in terms of like maintaining peace, maintaining our roads, our modern living, all of these things come from taxation and from governments. Now, I'm not going to go into wars and all of that shit, or whether we should like our governments or anything like that. I believe all of these things are irrelevant because we have governments. That's fact. We can't change that. And I think what societal collapse, like you say, might bring is just the collapse of government. And what happens in every situation when a government collapses? A new one gets reinstated. So something new, maybe a new constitution or whatever, but a rule of law does exist even after every collapse. So a government is seen as a necessity. But what ensures during periods of unrest, collapse, and there have been multiple rebellions and stuff like that. I mean, we only have to look at Arab Spring, for example, and what happened in Egypt. Shit is just back to how it was. I mean, exactly to how it was. And I have Egyptian friends, and I'm telling them, okay, so many people died, people have been imprisoned, judges may have changed, all of that stuff. So what has changed? Absolutely nothing. Right. So at the very end, things go back to how things were.
Exactly.
But in the midst of all this, I think there is fear. And that's what I particularly want to push towards people, something that we need to understand, that it is men that will bring about the collapse, right? It's not going to be women, it's going to be men, right? Or it could be a financial collapse. And again, men will start causing trouble and havoc and all that stuff. And again, it's going to be men who will be gynocentric and attacking their fellow men. So I can't directly blame this to women, although I really, really want to. Maybe you can give me a hand on that.
Sure. Well, you know, I think you've raised a very, very important point. So, for example, if we do have, let's say, some kind of a global financial collapse that literally shuts down the mechanisms of the governmental process and the civilizing process that we've had in our societies, you know, but by and large, you know, these governmental, you know, decisions are made by men like ourselves. So for sure, and you know, I disagree with the overwhelming majority of decisions made by the democratic governments in the UK. I completely disagree with them. I think they're absolutely crazy. But I also do recognize that the ability to have a somewhat neutral third party adjudicating on contracts, the use of violence and claiming a monopoly use of violence does have its role based on the extent to which we've developed now and based on resource scarcity. If for example, we lived in a situation where on planet Earth we had just it's a land of milk and honey, and we have just an abundance of resources. We certainly wouldn't need a government, so it comes into being for certain reasons, and for sure, gynocentrism, misandry would race back very, very quickly as men violently police one another, and failing to protect women in the absence of a government will be seen as one failing one's quote unquote masculine duties. And I don't see men benefiting from it. And also, there'll be a period of interregnum, which you've pointed out. And if you own anything, let's say you own property or you have bank accounts, everything will fall apart. How will you trade with your neighbor if you cannot go to the cash machine to get out cash, or your neighbor won't, let's say he or she grows corn. How are you going to trade for that, if you don't have anything to barter? So we're all alive because of this system we've now set up, and we won't survive. Physically, a large proportion of us will simply die out if there is a societal collapse. If, let's say, we suddenly at one point ran out of crude oil. How do we get food to the supermarkets within a couple of days? I can only just picture the riots and the violence. If your neighbor knows that you've stocked up on food, after 3 or 4 days when he's run out or she's run out, there's very little just to stop them from coming to your home, slitting your throat, and just like emptying your cupboards of the baked beans and the canned spinach that you have.
I think what people don't understand is all the cities, all the major cities everywhere in the world, London, for example, New York, any major city, right? Tokyo, whatever. All of these cities have enough food supplies to last for 24 hours. That's all.
Yeah, that's it.
Everything gets brought in every day. So anything stops that supply, then you have issues. And then whoever has a bit more, whoever has a bit less or whatever, all you need is a gun, anything, and you will have violence ensure 100% of the times, because people will be selfish, will look out for themselves. And within the violence, certain groups will arise, gangs or whatever, right? Militias, if you want to call them. And these people will try to reinstate, let's say, a certain form of law, right? And they will try to capitalize on everything that's available. And it's something that is inevitable. If anything was to change, if anything was to cut the supply of food for 2 days, 3 days, or whatever, then we will have certain violence that will ensure in the biggest cities everywhere in the world, where the majority of the population actually resides in.
For sure.
So that's something that we need to keep in mind. It's not all Well, roses and chocolate, I guess.
Well, I think because essentially you'd have brigandage, anarchy, and barbarism very, very quickly. We're not all that civilized. Maybe that's one of the things that a lot of people fail to realize, that we behave in a civilized manner because of the environment that we have around us. When that very, very fragile environment cracks just a little bit, you start to realize just how savage humans can be to other humans. I mean, we're a ferocious species. We're absolutely ferocious. And we forget that because we now have court systems and, police officers. If the police don't get paid for a couple of days, there's no incentive for them to do their jobs. And well, you're right. Your neighbor will simply come along, and and I can easily foresee a situation. Let's say, for example, in London, that there isn't food for a couple of days and there isn't water. A couple of gangs, armed to the teeth, will very, very quickly set themselves up as a local militia. Pretty much that's the de facto government, and it's maybe a toss-up, a 50-50 toss-up, if they're benevolent or if they're simply predatory. And if they're predatory, there's very, very little you can do. Maybe they won't let you leave the area.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanna discuss about this thing. I mean, TFM actually put it in one of his videos, and I agree with the videos. I mean, the way that systems are set up right now, with welfare state, the government paying for so many things, right? Pensions are becoming increasingly irrelevant because you're just borrowing from the next generation just to sustain all these pensions. People are living longer, so you need to keep paying for their national health or whatever, as the situation is set up in the UK. Where are the funds for all these things going to come from? How do you see a collapse, if a collapse is possible, going to happen in, let's say, the Western world? How would you envision that happening?
I see two major possibilities, and again, I wouldn't care to speculate to the extent to which these are, likely. Let's just, say, okay, here are a couple of possibilities. Let's say there's, the big issue is, let's say, some kind of a potential nuclear war. And in that situation, then the collapse would be, in my opinion, complete. So you would have troops on the streets. I mean, it would be pretty vicious stuff, and you would have, from one day to the next, a kind of violent, an incredibly violent chaos. And even if governments are reinstated, you would see coups regularly, because you would have a very, very shaky ground for any government apparatus. And you may even have an ongoing armed conflict abroad, or some, so that would be a very, very serious issue. And again, I'm not suggesting that is even a remote possibility, because for sure we now have the United Nations, and we have multiple international agreements to hopefully prevent that kind of scenario. And then the other scenario is just a kind of slow, financial collapse, whereby people simply become poorer and poorer and poorer and poorer over a period of time, and then just out of desperation due to the poverty, they simply rebel against the social institutions and set up, multiple de facto governments operating independently, almost in the manner of, let's say, the local mafia. So this individual claims this area as their own because the government simply no longer have the money to pay a police officer to patrol that beat, and that would be another situation. And if I had a choice, I don't know which I would prefer, to be honest.
I think. Well, I mean, if I was to choose, I'd prefer a quick and swift death rather than torture. I mean, that's personally my opinion on the matter. Just seeing slow deaths, not really pleasant. So what I was going to say is, you don't see, for example, a situation where, let's say, the division of wealth across the world and the top 10% of the world and the bottom 10%, they keep the division between them gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it keeps becoming like this because it's how capitalism works, after all, right? You don't see, let's say, a revolution, kind of like the French Revolution when it happened in the past, where men just, take weapons and just start killing and slaying people and redivide the wealth down to everyone. You don't see a possibility of that happening.
I certainly hope not, because the French Revolution was particularly violent. It was incredibly violent, and it was also, just the starvation that ensued, and the rise of Napoleon as a result of just the sheer desperation, during that period of time. So for sure, I guess the story of the human ape is a story of responding to random events, things that simply coalesce, whether it's technology that coalesces into, into an atom bomb that could potentially destroy the entire planet many, many times over. And random events will either take us to war or keep us in a state of peace. But again, so I don't know to the extent to which we will ever have such a situation. But I do know that a lot of the men going their own way who somehow look forward to this, I believe they're very misguided. Because men certainly won't have any form of easy time. Just the average guy out there. If you're prepared to be a violent, psychopathic predator on your fellow human beings, you may actually, at least for a period of time, until somebody even more violent comes along, for a period of time, you may be able to dominate and have things your own way for a little while. But then it just becomes, there was a saying by Ayn Rand. She said, when violence is the standard, the murderer wins over the pickpocket. And that is certainly the kind of scenario that will play out if there is a breakdown of social institutions, such as the police and the court systems, the jail systems.
On that, I absolutely agree with you. And it's important that we understand when a man, when I say a man, I mean men in general, has the opportunity to capitalize on a situation when there are no checkpoints to guide his behavior. There are no ramifications. Majority of people would be decent, good, but those people will not win. Those people will not be cherished or anything like that. People like that will be taken advantage of, and people will rule over them. And that's a reality that we need to acknowledge. Who was it? It was Stardust that said it in one of his videos. I think he said that when men realize that they've been taken advantage of, maybe they will just stop to engage. And when the situation is to collapse, we're just going to let women, for example, sort the situation out. Do you see this scenario being realistic? Even if the scenario is hypothetical, right? And a collapse happens because men completely disengage from society altogether. They just say, fuck it, I'm just gonna stick home, masturbate, fuck occasionally, whatever, right? I have these systems that will provide for me. Let women work and do their thing and be all independent and shit, right? And that will definitely bring a collapse, right? But I find that a completely unlikely scenario. Women collect garbage.
Same here. I guess that that there are two parts to your question there. The first is, do we see male disengagement, which is MGTOW, men, the abandoner phenomenon? Do we potentially see that leading to a collapse of civilization? And I would say absolutely not. The reason for that is this: unless you plan to simply stop living, you have to engage with society productively in one form or another. So, if you plan to eat, you have to work, unless you have independent means, and that's another thing entirely. So we're all productive. So MGTOW may choose to be slightly less productive, and I don't see a lot of evidence for that either. That men are simply saying, "Well, I'm going my own way now, so I'm going to perhaps only do a couple of hours work a day." So while a few MGTOW do that, my experience with a lot of MGTOW is MGTOW still work very, very hard. Because then we realize, hey, hold on, well, if I make a lot of money, I don't have to share it with anybody and I can have my hobbies. So there's still a tremendous amount of productivity. The only difference is that maybe men won't have a lot of conspicuous, spending. So because you're no longer trying to impress women, maybe you won't find yourself needing a huge sports car or something to that effect. So I don't see male disengagement, wholesale male disengagement, potentially leading to a collapse. And the second reason for that is this: when I look at the situation in Japan, where according to these, to our best estimates, 60% of individuals identify very, very strongly as herbivore men. These men, for all intents and purposes, have disengaged completely. They're refusing to marry. So some of them are even refusing to take on gainful employment, and even then it hasn't brought down an economy the size of Japan, and Japan at the moment certainly isn't the most productive countries. I mean, Germany's productivity levels are far higher, so you have the States, the industrialized parts of China. So when we take the experience from Japan, we can see, at least I guess we can extrapolate, that civilizational collapse won't come even if, let's say, 50 to 60% of men simply disengaged. So I don't see that happening. So again, my message to a lot of those guys who are hoping that wholesale abandonment will lead to some kind of societal collapse, I don't believe there's evidence for that. In fact, quite the opposite. I think the economy will simply keep on churning along. I think everyone's a little bit poorer for it, because then the government won't be able to afford a lot of the social services and things like that. And even if we, again, did have that type of situation, it would be a very, very soft collapse. It would be just, perhaps decades of poverty versus, rioting in the streets and no police officers. Yeah, so I guess that's just my hypothesis.
Okay, yeah, you said it was a two-part question. I'm forgetting what the second part was.
Unfortunately, same here. I just kind of ranted on.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, it's all right. So I will agree with you. I mean, Japan is not collapsing, not by any extent of the imagination, just by looking at things. And the situation is, I mean, right now, most of the jobs can be done by women. I mean, they can be done, not as well. I'm 100% sure that they can be done as well, not as productively or anything like that. But most of the jobs, they can be done by women, right? And women can take over and do jobs and work and all of that stuff. Now, the situation is, I believe that a certain point will come when these women are not finding any suitable males, any suitable marriage partners or anything like that. I think that they will again start becoming MGTOW, right? And they might disengage themselves completely as well. Because I see a lot of women who are also fed up with men. I mean, in the UK specifically. Because no one is getting, not no one, but many guys are not interested in, settling down. They don't want to marry. The majority of guys do not marry anymore, not until after 35. So the situation, the social climate is changing. Now, I think this is not pushing for a societal collapse, not in any shape of the imagination that we imagine it to be, but it's pushing for a change in how things are done. And it's going to be a natural change because the cat's out of the bag, like we said. Equality is reality that will never come back. And things will change slightly in order to favor, let's say, interaction between men and women. Perhaps marriage as an institution would be completely pointless, right? Perhaps children outside wedlock will be the absolute norm, and they are. Right now they are.
Sure.
So things will change, but I think society will continue to will continue on. And additionally, I find that hoping that at some point in time, all of men will be 100% MGTOW, right? Understanding everything that we talk about right now is not really possible. First of all, because most of the guys, even after you're MGTOW, most of the guys still want to engage with women in some form or another.
For sure.
So we don't, and most of the guys will continue to work and be productive, like you said, because all of the MGTOW guys that I spoke to, they still work. But things will not be a complete separation. I think we almost have this idea that the majority of MGTOWs or people within this community go their own way, do their own thing, never touch, see, speak, or do anything with women altogether. Don't participate in society in any meaningful ways. And that's completely false.
For sure.
And I don't understand why such a position exists within the community, because we know better, right? We are in the community, so we should understand what's happening.
Absolutely. No, I think you've raised a hugely important issue, because let's say, we have a hypothetical scenario. Let's say in London tomorrow, everything literally falls apart. No groceries, so the supermarket shelves are empty. What's going to happen is women will almost overnight become submissive and, just, I want to find a protector provider. And that really appeals to a certain part of the human psyche, just something very, very vulnerable that you can also, or someone very, very vulnerable that you can also have sex with, that needs your protection. That really, really appeals to those guys. So what you may find is an almost overnight return to a pair bonding again. I mean, certainly marriage will be out of the question because there's no state to recognize a pair bond, and women certainly won't marry if, what's she going to do? Okay, I'm leaving you now, and I'm claiming half of the tin beans in the kitchen. He'll just say, look, he'll just say, look, fuck off, bitch. Like, if you want to go, you can go, but you're not taking my shit.
Yeah.
But what you'll find is you'll find long-term pair bonds come back again very, very quickly, so we may just have a kind of form of traditionalism rushing back. Also, I guess one of the things that I possibly see, which is also very, very harmful to men, if there were some kind of a, let's say, soft societal collapse or wholesale male disengagement, is this. When, for example, we analyze the minimum wage, and I know this seems completely off topic, but I'll bring it back into what we're discussing here. Minimum wage tends to lead to automation. So let's say, for example, we're working for Starbucks and we start to demand $30 an hour as a minimum wage. At one point, Starbucks will simply say, look, I can't afford to pay you $30 an hour, but also, if I'm, instead of paying you $30 an hour and maybe I have 50 employees, in this local area, I can invest that money in automation and, automate my stores in the same way that they've automated a lot of supermarket checkouts. So we simply don't need employees any longer. You're asking for more money than we think is economically viable to pay you. We may tend to see the same thing if we see wholesale male disengagement, and I don't think this is good or bad. It just is what it is. Society may respond with increased automation. So a lot of the jobs, particularly a lot of the low-paid jobs, which were owned by men in the past or performed by men, we may just see, hey, hold on, men are wholesale abandoning these roles, so we're just going to automate these roles. And what it may force society to do, or humans to do, is to innovate, and actually for the first time in many, many decades, make real productivity gains. And it may render underskilled men even more obsolete. Because I think it's very, very important that we understand that part of the reason men are disengaging with society, even if they don't adopt the MGTOW label, is the fact that it's far more difficult now to get on a career path. A lot of the traditional kind of male kind of starting or launch roles. Let's say a guy worked filling gas in a petrol station and then he became a mechanic. A lot of these jobs are disappearing. They're far harder to come by. And this is pushing male disengagement. So what you may have, if there's enough male disengagement, we may simply automate. So let's say you look back in the 60s, if you drove to a petrol station, there was a kid there pumping the gas. You simply don't have that these days. And again, so it's a feedback mechanism if less men engage. And I'm not suggesting men should or shouldn't engage. I think things tend to just follow random, progressions. But if that does happen enough, automation will absolutely come in, and this will cause its own set of issues for men to then deal with. So there are just so many factors to this, and I don't think that a lot of these guys who again have it's like a collapse fantasy, or it's it's that kind of revenge collapse pornographic fantasy. I don't think we've truly thought this through, that this will have very, very terrifying implications for men in particular.
And I mean, it's something that we forget. And I mean, we're at the interim point, I think, right now of the automation and all that stuff that you discussed. I mean, most of the jobs are getting automated right now. Most of the jobs, I mean, even if you fucking call someone, right, there is an automatic answering machine that will divert you to go to the right place. Everything is absolutely changing and is becoming more automated. That technology is catching up with human nature, let's say. So it's not just men that are becoming obsolete in many of the jobs. Women are becoming obsolete as well. And it's not just male jobs that are getting replaced. It's just that a lot of the hard labor, right, a lot of the manual labor that many people are doing are becoming easier to do right now by using tools. And it's a blessing and a curse at the same time, which is what's, I guess, if you're not going to be getting paid enough and yet you're still out in the cold doing dangerous job and all that stuff, then why continue to do it in a way? And people are trying to choose a different path, trying to choose different careers. But again, those careers are limited. There are not many things that you can personally do. After all, we're all dealt with a certain set of cards, and we can only do what we're able to do at the end of the day, I find, at least. So maybe, it's pushing disengagement. And also women, I believe, are disengaging, not from the workplace as such, but also because their standard of living, because of the welfare, all of this shit that are available, is higher than most of the men.
Agreed.
And because of hypergamy, they just simply don't want to engage with these men. And it's inevitable that something like this will happen, or more men will disengage completely. Or, I mean, we're already seeing this change. I mean, articles were recently released, less men going to university, less men want to engage in a way, less men are getting married, less men. It's always less men are doing less things, right? And they start. And it's creating problems in society, because whenever you have men with lots of free time, not doing very much, hating their existence, I believe it brings up violence. And it does bring violence, and then we have more engagement with the police and all these things. The state gets more involved. But I think we're forgetting an important part in this situation. I mean, we're focusing on men in particular, and we're saying that, there are these things that are happening and men are to blame, not to blame, but men are responsible for some of the things that are happening right now. I mean, generally, men as a gender, right? I'm not blaming anyone for their life choices or whatever. I don't particularly care either way. Now, it's as the state is right now and as it's set up right now, I don't think it's feminism to blame directly. I mean, we're in MGTOW, so we don't believe in feminism. I think this transition on women and their disengagement with male sex, or their inability to be satisfied with just that one man who's doing that one job as a long-term partner, is something that is seen because of the resources that we have available, the security that we have available within the Western world, at least. And it's a natural transition, what's happening. And that's pushing more men away from society, because again, it's more women are highly skilled, and they're competing with men, and we have all these laws about quotas and all that shit. So a lot of men are not getting jobs, even if they want to right now. This is happening, and it leaves a bitter taste in your mouth, doesn't it? If you're actually looking for something to do, if you're looking to be productive, and you can't.
Sure. Absolutely. I guess for a young guy now, you know, and in many ways, we're very, very lucky. You know, I'm you know, in my 30s now, so I managed to pick up a skill set when the economy was still in very, very good shape. You know, so I do have a lot of concern for the younger guys now. But and I absolutely agree with you that if there is a societal collapse, I mean, if we think hypergamy is an issue now, hypergamy will rush back in a way that is likely unfathomable, you know, to the modern guy today. You know, women will most certainly flock to, you know, just the most violent guys who can essentially protect them. So you're going to see, you know, one guy with like, you know, 50 strong, you know, harem of women for sure. And yeah, I mean, it's certainly not going to be an enjoyable thing. I guess, you know, I'd love to find out from your point of view. I mean, from your experience with a lot of these kind of younger guys coming today, do you see their long-term non-participation or inability to even find work, or to inability to find a professional, that first job? Do you see that driving some form of societal collapse in the long run, or even in the short term?
I mean, I can't say about the collapse in general, but all I can say is that when you see young men right now, and I mean young men in general, you know, average in everything, IQ 100, average skills, average grades, B, and all that stuff, right? The average person, the average man will have less chance of getting to university, right? Less chance of acquiring a degree that might be useful, less chance of engaging in any meaningful way with society. And these men are getting angry. And even if they're looking for a job, and many of them do, many of them go to places, ask for employment. They keep sending their CVs everywhere, but they're having a very hard time engaging, and that leads to all sorts of problems. It leads to social isolation for these men in particular. It leads to depression and other health problems, and a lot of anger. I see a lot of anger coming from these men. I'm not sure. Anger and resentment, I think, might be the primary feeling that I see within these men. And even within men who go to university and manage to get to a course that they like, you know, within STEM fields that there is guaranteed, let's say, employment perhaps in the end, they're still disengaging because within that system that they go to university, they're seeing how things really are. They see the misandric system that exists. There is a lot of information out there. They see women trying to top them up and all these things, and the illusion is breaking up all the time around them. And the situation right now in universities for men is horrible, even in the UK. And I've left university not many years ago, so it's hard to see how things have so drastically changed even within this small span of time. So I'm not sure. The way that I envision collapse is actually through aggression. Through male-specific aggression about their disenfranchisement, and you know, terrorist attacks that have occurred recently. They always come from a place where, you know, people are suffering socially. They're poor. They come from a poor place. There is violence within that area, and they always seem to stem from these particular areas. So I think if something was to happen and something a bit more organized, it will come from the average guys, the average blokes that are not able to find employment. They're not able to find fulfillment in their lives. And for these men, I actually feel sorry for, because they're young, they're intelligent, They want to be highly productive, but it's very difficult for them to do so.
Agreed. I agree with you, and I think it's always very, very important for us to, you know, really analyze the situation of the average guy out there. So while within MGTOW, we as a group may have completely, you know, we've sworn off marriage, it's not going to happen. You know, some of us even swear off relationships, period. But the average guy out there hasn't. They very, very much still want to, you know, potentially have kids. You know, they're looking for that sweet girl to settle down with. They still want to find a partner. They still want to, quote unquote, you know, I want to fall in love. So what you have now through hypergamy, you know, through disengagement is, you know, and again, I loved your last, so it was 5 or 6 videos ago where you pointed out it's sexual disenfranchisement, and this certainly leads to increased societal violence. I mean, we saw it in Egypt during the uprising, and we've seen it's very, very fertile ground, that kind of sexually disenfranchised male, for, you know, extreme radicalization of you know, of religious beliefs and you know, extreme political agendas. And yeah, absolutely, this will certainly increase societal violence. I mean, we've seen it on, you know, just individually, where you now have incredibly violent white knighting, the kind that was almost unheard of before. You know, but particularly in London. I mean, these days, I mean, just the I've stopped going out to bars because of the just insane levels of violence. You know, you were looking at my girlfriend, and then like one guy gets stabbed. You know, that's how bad it is now. And it's certainly just again, because of hypergamy now, men keep hold of, you know, their girlfriends or any women within them, you know, within their kind of orb. And because I remember in your previous chat with Spetsnaz, you know, he'd said something which was just really, really spot on, that the average guy out there now, when he gets a girlfriend, they hold on to this woman for just dear life. You know, he's not allowed to leave the house, you know, and see his friends, but she's allowed to go out without even bothering to tell him, you know, who she's with. She fucks around behind his back. If he does the same, it's just, you know, it's you know, he's outed and he's a bastard, you know. So there are very, very real issues, and these real issues certainly will lead to increased forms of societal violence, you know, particularly against males.
Yeah, and it's always violence against males. I mean, whatever people say, or feminists or all these idiots try to say that violence can increase for women or is on the rise for women. I mean, okay, even if I assume it is, right? Even if I assume there is a point in time where violence against women is actually higher than what it was before, then I would assume that the violence for men is at exponential levels, because a man will be violent if he feels threatened. Again, violence does stem from fear. And all these men, all the white knighting that we see around, is these men are scared that these women will leave them. And it speaks to a base instinct almost. These men recognize that their women are looking around.
For sure.
They're still shopping, right? It doesn't matter if they're married to them, locking them up in basements or whatever. Their women are still shopping. So we need to understand these things, and the violence that we see now on the rise within the streets. I mean, people are getting stabbed for doing absolutely nothing.
Oh, for sure.
It's happening. I mean, we're saying that we're less violent than we are before because we have more policing around, but people are on edge, and people will call me a bit more, I don't know, extreme in my views on that or whatever. But when I see acts of violence without any causal factor, you know, either from a look of a person or because a person was just sitting there and the other person didn't like them, then I see just anger or resentment just bottling to come to the surface. It seems to be that, that's what I see. This is my reality of how I see things. I see men boiling up and they're ready to explode. I mean, now I don't think this will happen simultaneously everywhere, but it can happen, and it has happened in other countries as well. The Arab Spring is a very good example of that.
For sure. For sure.
But we need to understand that all these things, I mean, ideas, extremism, ideologies, religion, and all this shit, all of these things are byproducts, right? Anything that promises a man who is, desperate, hope, people will cling to. It doesn't matter what the fuck it is, or
Exactly.
what ridiculous ideology it might be. People will just grasp it, and they
For
will
sure.
take their chance. And that is a very dangerous environment. And
For
that's
sure.
what we need to look out for. I believe it.
Oh, I agree. I mean, religion primarily is in the hope business. It's which for me is one of the most dastardly businesses to be in. And just on your previous points of just the incredible levels of male-on-male violence we now see, and not just male-on-male violence, but lethal violence as well. Whereas maybe 20 years ago, a couple of guys would have had a fist fight and then everybody walks home. But now one of them, lays dead. It reminds me of a quote by Steven Pinker in his book, The Better Angels of Our Nature. And I know he quoted it from another psychologist. He pointed out when an organism feels it's on a path to a genetic dead end, it will expand an enormous amount of energy to change its trajectory. And again, that's what immediately comes to mind when I see, incredibly violent white knighting. It's the last, kind of desperate act to change, a genetic dead end, as it were. If I do this, she'll like me. If I beat this guy into a pulp, maybe she'll open her legs for me. And for sure, you're completely right that when we do have a social breakdown or a breakdown of the dictum familiar, it's violent male-on-male competition. It's not socially acceptable for a guy to just simply attack another woman, even if she's being just a complete piece of shit, just a proper human urinal. He can't just go wild at her. But he can do that to another guy. Somebody may not even bother to call the police. They'll just let them fight it out. One of them may die.
Mm-hmm.
So for sure, just the ability for a guy just to lash out at another guy, it isn't socially sanctioned. It isn't sanctioned, of course, by the judiciary system, but socially, it's far more acceptable than a guy just smacking the shit out of his girlfriend, even if she actually.
I'm sorry. I coughed.
Oh, sure. That's okay. Just don't do it again, buddy.
I'll try.
Warhorse reckons that we're hanging around a bunch of bikers. I wish.
Absolutely. I mean, what we see in the micro scale right now, right? This is what we need to focus on. What a collapse will look like. If a collapse happens, again, unlikely, like you said, and I tend to agree with you. But if a collapse happens, what we see in the micro scale is going to be on the macro scale times 10, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we really shouldn't be looking for. It's not going to be people going like, well, fuck, we don't have hospitals right now. Let's train some doctors. Let's build some hospitals. Let's try and get things running again. No. People will kill, stab, attack, do absolutely everything, create mayhem so that they can gain from the situation, right? It's ensuring that you can guarantee yourself some reproductive access. One of the ways is to guarantee that you're alive, and some people can cower and hide and all these things, but other people might just rise to power for whatever reason, right? Because this is our nature of responding to things. It's the nature of fight or flight, and it's what people will tend to do. But it's not going to be a pretty sight, not by any extent of the imagination. It's not going to be this idea of all the MGTOW stand on the roof somewhere and they just look at and look at the whole place burning, and they just laugh their evil laughs because they predicted this. This is not what's going to be.
Exactly. It's not going to be a return to, picket fences and women back in long dresses and, fashionable hats and Sunday church. It's going to be anarchy, theft, intimidation, maybe even a feudal system may even emerge from it again. And men certainly didn't benefit, from a feudal system. I mean, a couple of very, very wealthy lords and individuals did, but the average guy suffered unashamedly under these systems.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, what you're predicting and what I'm predicting, I guess, in this talk is that any collapse or whatever shape or form it might take, it will lead to a return to traditionalism, right?
Exactly.
Let's forget the interim and all this shit and all the violence, the deaths, the piles of dead bodies and the mass graves and all that shit. Unimportant. We don't have to think about that now. But what will happen is that traditionalism will ensure afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And as MGTOW, we need to understand that traditionalism is not what we want to see.
Oh yeah.
It's not going to be any better. Maybe you'll guarantee that that woman of yours will not cheat because you might beat her to a pulp or some shit like that, right? But it's not going to be something that will be beneficial for men. Men will be disposable, perhaps even more so than they are now, because right now you have a choice as how much disposability you're willing to engage yourself in.
Exactly.
So I think the system as it is right now, it gives a lot of men choices, and the choice is as to the extent of their engagement. There's a lot of liberty with regards to that. Now, it's still shit, it's still horrible, but it allows for at least your freedom to engage as much as you want to engage it. Now, if we want to see a collapse, I think what we should be focusing on is a collapse from the current state of affairs between the sexes.
Absolutely. And just to add to what you were saying earlier on, under traditionalism, one of the kind of major features of a traditionalist society is a real mistrust of bachelors. People absolutely do not want bachelors around under traditionalism because, of course, that they're worried. Look, you're gonna, that guy's worried you're gonna fuck his 19-year-old daughter. You're gonna knock her up, and then you're gonna skip town. You know what I mean? Then you're going to skip town.
Yeah.
People don't want that. And it's only now we have a society. I mean, maybe in the last 30 or 40 years or so, where unmarried men are not discriminated against in the labor force. I mean, if you maybe go back to the 60s or 70s, some jobs openly said, look, if you're not married, simply don't bother applying for this role because, bachelors were simply not trusted. It was very, very much seen that if a man had a wife and a child, he would work like a government mule for 60 years. You know what I mean? He wouldn't be able to quit his job. He would work and work and work, and he wouldn't be able to say to the employer, "Hey, look, fuck you. I'm not going to do that." Where's he going to go? So traditionalism is the system that gets a man to work in a coal mine until the day, he develops, mesothelioma or something, or working in an asbestos mine. So that is traditionalism. And for me, men suffered for millennia under such a system. And I mean, we didn't really gain much. For me, it really doesn't matter if your wife doesn't, so let's say, for example, I'm married and my wife runs away with a pool boy, or she's fucking a pool boy while I'm working in a coal mine. For me, I would prefer not to work in a coal mine. I really don't care about her sexual, her fidelity. For me, the most important thing is my own well-being, my own peace of mind and sanity. And you're completely right. Under the current system, we can choose to engage or disengage. Under traditionalism, our ability to do that is very, very severely limited. And also, let's say, for example, there is some kind of grand civilizational collapse. It's very, very difficult to do things individually yourself. I mean, just the average guy out there, including myself, you know, if you look at the amount of work it takes just to feed a single human being, maybe you wake up at 5 a.m. and you know, you feed the chickens, you clear a patch of land to grow some tomatoes. This is intense backbreaking work, and you'll find all of your time is simply spent feeding yourself. You know, you certainly won't be able to get ahead. I mean, you know, if you know, tear your shirt or something, that's another half an hour of work stitching the thing together under some lamp. So just purely for the division of labor, people will likely find a way to settle down with, just simply because many hands make light work. So it's just an immediate rush back to just the most disgusting forms of traditionalism.
And I mean, right now, what the problem is again, it's sexual disenfranchisement rather than anything else. There's nothing really else that's causing problems. I mean, security. I mean, okay, yes, a lot of men are going to prison and all these things and the laws and all of that stuff. But as a bachelor, you have a lot of choice. And the way that the laws are structured, etc., I do think they're viewing the world from a very traditionalist lens, right?
Yes,
and they're prolonging something, changes in laws and the way things are run and all these things, because it's a very lucrative business for them. But under traditionalism, under a house where one person works alone and you still value the liberty of that female, then you would require certain laws that are in existence right now. And I believe it is with certain ideas in mind that people voted these laws in. Now, right now, I think that men are having difficulty finding partners that they can trust. Men and women mistrust each other because none of them does what's natural, right? Something in their instincts is saying, not really, right? And when I say natural, we have to understand that there has always been a division of labor, not just within a home, but even within, let's say, small villages in the past, within smaller communities before that, even within the hunter and gatherer community. There was always a certain division of labor. Right now, what the fuck anyone does is up to, you know, their own volition.
Exactly.
And that doesn't allow for pair bonding to occur. And I think it's down to our biology. It's down to the actions of feminism as well, who's you know, feminists seem to be promoting all these you know, protections for women when there is absolutely no need for them anymore. So all of these things do play a role, but we need to understand that right now, as single men, we're not horribly bad, especially if you choose to completely disengage with women altogether, right? You have all the ability, all the freedom in the world to just do and live your life as you please. And that's the point of MGTOW. That you have this ability within the current system. Now, if the system was to change, and I have no idea how, but if it was to change to something drastically different, maybe MGTOW will not be the answer, right? Sure. Although I would still be a bachelor, I would still not want to engage, I would still not want to do any of that shit. But maybe then it will become incredibly difficult for me to be able to live my life, especially when I apply for a consultant job, for example, and they tell me, yeah, we only get people who are married. Exactly. So we need to understand that things have changed, and they have changed since Warhorse's time. I remember he was telling me that you didn't have a choice back then. You had to get married.
Exactly.
We're only talking some decades ago. It's not a long time ago, but the situation has drastically changed.
Exactly. I completely agree with you, and I'm very, very glad that we no longer live in those times, because I mean, there's a gentleman who comments on a lot of videos called Kira, and I absolutely love his comments. And he's posted something in the chat saying, too much individualism will lead to societal breakdown. I think that is a very, very astute observation. I mean, I don't completely agree with Kira, but for sure, every revolution, and individualism was a revolution. The ability to say, look, I simply don't want to pair bond. I mean, that was a radical concept. I mean, again, Warhorse pointed out, in the past you didn't have a choice. So radical is a concept, and it's a very, very new one. So for sure, individualism will, within it, have the seeds of its own destruction, as it were. It may hasten societal collapse in certain ways. Again, I would certainly prefer to live in an individualistic society versus a collectivist society where I'm forced to marry or forced to settle down. But again, I mean, to what extent do you agree with Kira's statement that too much individualism will lead to societal breakdown?
I actually believe that productive individualism will not lead to societal collapse. So, I mean, if you're individualistic, selfish, and all that shit, and you still do your work, you still are productive to society, why will that reach for a societal collapse?
For sure. Yeah, no, that's a very, very good point. Kira's one of his comments are so insightful. I don't know if you know Kira, or I've never spoken with him. His comments are so insightful. I'm hoping actually one of these days he sets up a channel, because I just absolutely really enjoy his comments.
Here's to opening another channel. The more, the better, I think.
Absolutely, Kira, you need to open up a channel, buddy.
So yeah, where were we? We were talking about the collapse of traditionalism, and I mean, right now there is no traditionalism. Inherently, I think women and men understand that even within a marriage is not going to last forever. And if you speak to men and women, I mean, men hope it lasts forever so that they don't, just get really, really poor and die. But women in general, if you speak to them honestly, they will say they will be married as long as they can, as long as there is some magic in it and all that shit. Absolutely. Now, a bond that used to be something that would last forever no longer is so. And because of our increased life expectancy, because of the availability of things, technology as it exists right now, and how you can do multiple things at the same time. Even as a bachelor, I think I can do my own laundry, I can do my own cooking, I can do everything without even breaking a sweat right now. I don't even consider it work. Yeah. In the past, it would take at least like a couple of people to be able to do all of these things just for one person. Yeah. But right now, there is no need for any of that stuff. And I think people understand it. Yeah, so right now, there is no such thing as traditionalism. As we live it, people are selling us the idea of traditionalism. People are romanticizing about traditionalism, but the state of affairs is that there is no traditionalism. Women are looking for multiple partners as well. I think many of them are, just jumping from one monogamous relationship to the next. Sure. Many of the guys are dating multiple women. Some are dating no women at all. So it's a wide variety of life choices that people are making, and they're only able to make these life choices because of a stable system that exists.
For sure. I guess what, and I agree with you, because I've tended to see that in a lot of women these days, that there was a particular girl I knew, and literally she's seeing like 7, 8 guys at once, and quite literally on a Sunday she will, she's fucked one guy in the night, and she's pushing that guy out the door by like 10:30 a.m. and cleaning up the apartment because the next guy's coming at 11. And when I see that kind of behavior, I mean, hey, look, it's her own choice, but all I can think of is, that kid who, its mother said, look, you can't have chocolate, and for the first time it has money, or he or she has money, and it just goes on like a chocolate binge, not realizing, hey, like, this stuff should be done in moderation, because in moderation, hey, it's great, but in a high amount it can damage your health. So I'm always very amused whenever I see that these days, that you just have the kind of professional cock carousel rider not really, kind of understanding the STDs and all of that shit, but hey, but for sure. And whenever I come across women like that, I do try to avoid them. I find them particularly destructive. Even for just a short-term, fling, I just find them too destructive.
Absolutely, and the younger the women are, the more they're thinking like this. I mean, the majority of young women in universities will be riding the cock carousel non-stop for as many years as it takes. And it's not just from men within universities, because men are getting scared. They will fuck older guys, younger guys, whatever the fuck is available, as long as it's shaped like a penis. And I know I'm being incredibly harsh on women right now. I know you guys look for at least a pulse most of the times, but
if it looks like a cock, she'll get naked.
Yeah, it seems to be the situation. And men, on the other hand, when you look at these women, you cannot trust them. Why put your dick inside this woman and commit to her and have children with her? How would you know, first of all, that that child will be yours? How would you know, first of all, that that woman will remain faithful to you? So it's not just a phase, as feminism will have us believe, or social media, or whatever the hell, I just wanted to live my life and all that stuff. No, it's not. It's not that. It's just women now have the ability to sample many guys. The majority of the guys that they sample initially might just be alpha material and all that shit, but they will continue to do the sampling process, all of it, by stretching their legs open until they realize that, I'm getting a bit old now. Maybe I should just give birth to a couple of children or something like that, right? But they're finding men who will be increasingly less likely to just get them pregnant, and if they do get them pregnant, less likely to stick around to raise those children, because most of them will have no idea whether those children are theirs anyway. So yeah, there is a huge split happening within the traditional gender, let's say, norms, as I like to see them.
No, I agree with you. And one of the things I always try to point out to guys who end up, settling down with one of these women, these, very, very hardened kind of former, cock carousel rider. And some, and again, but what I actually do respect about today, the kind of modern female, is that she's very, very honest. In days gone by, she would have just fucked around behind the guy's back, but now they're like, yeah, I've slept with, like a woman that I know, and she's married. I mean, I'm sure she said this to her husband, but she certainly said it to me. She said, yeah, I'm really, really glad I found him, because I've been around the block and I didn't think any guy would want me. She said she'd been around the block hard, and one of the things I always point out to these guys is, look, you're not her first choice. She's settling for you, and that is going to be very, very destructive for you in the long run. In the same way that if you found somebody, let's say you had a business partner, and you're not particularly sure about that person's competence, but you just needed warm bodies, as it were, just to physically do some of the work. It's never a real partnership. There's always just an element of resentment, and very, very soon you will get out of that business relationship, just simply because that individual isn't your first choice. They were a means to an end. They were a warm body needed to perform a task, and one that is, intolerable in the long run.
I think the social change will be summed up in this small phrase, right? In the past, there used to be men that settled down. Right now, it's women that settle down when it comes to marriage. And we need to understand that a woman that has fucked, 150 guys, the husband that she found for herself is not the guy who's the best in her mind, right? Maybe that was guy number one. Yeah. Maybe that was guy number one, or guy number, 102, right? But her husband definitely isn't. It's just the right time, right place, and she just makes the decision.
Exactly. He was literally, and again, because I have a lot of female friends in that age group, literally, he was the guy who was closest to her at that point, you know, just through just physical proximity, just literally.
That's what you want to know before you sign your entire life and life savings away, that your woman found you because you were close to her at that point in time.
Yeah,
she was thinking,
exactly.
what's next? Maybe I should get married. And that guy was sitting next to her. Nah, this guy's good enough. Right.
Quite literally, quite. In fact, I've seen that. I can give you just a load of examples. I mean, when I used to work for, there was a publishing house I used to work for in the city, and I would see women get to that age of, you know, 35, 36 or whatever, and literally they would end up getting with the guy who literally sat next to them in the office. And I mean this quite literally. So the guy who either sat, you know, his desk is opposite it, like his cubicle's opposite hers, or his cubicle's next to hers, and you would just find after about 6 months or so, like, you know, they've got a Facebook post and it's like they're engaged now. Quite literally, they will grab just the closest guy. And I just feel sorry for a lot of these guys because they haven't figured out just how women are at that age, you know. And you know, yeah, for me, it's just absolutely heartbreaking. I just couldn't imagine anything worse.
Mm-hmm. I think, and sorry for advertising PUA shit now. Rollo Tomasi's book, the second book that he published, he outlines these phases in a woman's life very, very well. And when she reaches, when she's close to the wall, you know, slightly after her 30s, 32, something like that, then the woman will panic and will look for the closest proximity male, the best available male that she has in her life at that point in time, to settle down with, and that's what she will do. And that woman will always resent that man. Any woman within this generation, any woman who's been born into this feministic reality of things, and you know, all this available resources for them for free, and they can just fucking do whatever the hell they want, it's going to resent that man, and that man is not going to have a good time. It's not bliss for any extent of the imagination. And we need to understand that there is no reason in modern civilization as we live it to get married.
Agreed. I mean, again, she's going to resent him for forgiving her past. That is just the first point of resentment. The fact that he forgave her past in her mind makes him a low value guy. I mean, because she knows that she's, for all intents and purposes, you know, men tend to prefer women who are younger, who are, you know, monotonous, who, you know, it's, you know, because we're looking for, you know, when you even have sex with a girl, just even a random fling, we're looking for markers of genetic fitness, and youth is one of those. So the fact that he forgives her past is the first thing she'll hold against him.
Well, and not just that, I would say that the slut shaming that feminists keep fighting because they're idiots and they think that the majority of things are socially conditioned, is a fight against this natural instinct that women and men have, that they're less valuable if they fuck 150 people, right? And I mean, women fuck 150 people. Men, it doesn't matter how many people you fuck, but with women being sexually promiscuous and all these things does drop their evolutionary value to the available man.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's not in the eyes of men alone. That's even in their own eyes, which is why one of the things, I mean, for example, if you ever, you know, it's that thing of never ask a woman how many guys she slept with, and you know, and I've seen women do it to other women. They'll say, well, you know, he's asked how many guys I've slept with. You know, shall I be honest with him? Because of course, even to other women, they realize that, hey, look, men prefer a woman with a low notch count, and they realize that if they want to secure a you know relationship with a guy, then they just of course have to essentially just outright lie. So any number she gives you might multiply it by 15. And then
it used to be by 3, man. That's just extreme.
You know, she'll conveniently forget the porn shoot she took part in.
No, I think what we need to understand when you ask a woman how many partners she's had in her life or any of that stuff, because most of us are being politically correct, they will answer about the number of boyfriends that they've had in their lives. So a woman with 180 dicks in her so far, she might say 2 or something, because she had 2 boyfriends in between all of those dicks. Now, that is not reality, and the question that men are asking is how many dicks have you fucked, and that's the reality. So are we saying that the current system as it is good for men?
No, I would say the current system is the lesser of many possible evils. And again, although it seems very, very bad now, you know, that there's just heaps and heaps of issues. We have the issues going on in the, you know, with the yes means yes laws. We have the higher rates of male incarcerations. You know, we have, you know, just a heap of issues. Things can always be worse. And certainly, if there is a societal collapse, we will see just how bad things can get for men.
Absolutely. And we're not saying that things are jolly, brilliant.
Oh yeah, no, things are terrible.
Things are absolutely terrible. But if you're a man going his own way, I don't think things are that bad right now. All right. As things are, the possibilities for you. And I said literally in one point, and someone was like, nah, it's not literally. Yeah, it's figuratively endless, right? So you can live your life how you want. Perhaps maybe, you know, sexual gratification in the imagined Hollywood style kind of thing, it will not be feasible for you, but it's definitely possible to live a very fulfilling life, full of contentment and full of challenges. As for what the best available future is, I don't know. And I'm just going to give a lol to Golden Eagle Owl. Excuse me, miss, what is your penile intake? That is the best thing I've read all day.
Oh, shit.
Well, I think we definitely needed that laugh after we talked about massacres and deaths and all that stuff. What do you think? I mean, I'm going to ask you this question, and I think you're more reasonable than me. I'm a bit out there anyway.
Oh, I'm not too sure I'm more reasonable, but sure.
Well, you know, we'll count as reasonable or something like that. I think you're more reasonable anyway. What do you think right now will need to take place for the state of affairs to become pleasant for both men and women?
That's a very, very good question. I mean, the first thing that immediately comes to mind is that we would have to have an abundance of resources. You know, productivity would have to go up to such a point that there wouldn't be a penalty incurred, or there wouldn't be a huge penalty incurred for disengagement. Because at the moment, disengaging from society puts you at a tremendous disadvantage financially. Let's say, for example, you only want to work a couple of hours a week. You simply have less income, or all things being equal, unless you're some kind of a derivatives trader where you can just show up online and make just vast amounts of money every single month. So there's a penalty for non-participation at the moment. So either productivity would have to go up massively, or the resources that we have available would have to go up massively. Barring those two things, I don't believe things will drastically change. In fact, I'm very, very sure that, you know, if the social conditions that led to MGTOW, you know, the necessity of MGTOW, if these social conditions still exist in 40, 50, 60 years, we'll still be discussing the same issues. Maybe there'll be different news piece, you know, articles that we'll be responding to at that point, but it's still the same social issues. So unless there's a dramatic change in the environment that we have, I don't believe male disposability will go away anytime soon at all. I mean, certainly if we wake up one day and there's food enough to feed the entire planet, and we just have an absolute abundance of resources, and labor productivity goes up by a factor of 3, automation goes up massively, so there are just huge productivity gains. Then slowly it may change the environment to such a point that the internal drivers, such as male disposability, may simply lose just lose all meaning. And then for sure, men will just have a much easier time of it. Unless that happens, I'm not particularly positive just for the long term. So for me, again, MGTOW will give you more freedom potentially, but for sure, there are only trade-offs. There are no real solutions. At least that's just my kind of gut reaction to this.
Yeah, what I'm going to say to this, because I'm a bit more extreme in my views anyway. So I believe that we don't need changes in marriage laws or divorce laws or anything like that. We need the abolition of marriage as an institution altogether. We need automation to increase, like you said. We need to become a society that is productive on its own without the need of, let's say, any disposability from the point of view of men, in terms of we have the available technology to do all the jobs that need to get done. And after that point on, I think things will stabilize and normalize naturally in terms of the engagement between the sexes, in terms of the engagement with men and other men, because there won't be many things that will be dividing us, let's say, and productivity will be limited in terms of other things, more intellectual pursuits, maybe science or anything like that. But again, it's probably a utopian future that I'm seeing in my head and being hopeful and all that stuff. But I think at least the way that things are right now, we need the abolition of marriage altogether as an institution, and we definitely need the laws to go back to normal shit. Like, people are not proven guilty until they're innocent. It makes no sense.
It's not even that now. I mean, what you have nowadays is, if you're a man, it's but in certain situations it's guilty until proven guilty. So you kind of firstly have a trial by media, and then simultaneously then you have a legal trial, and if you're not found guilty in the judiciary system, the media will just, he raped 5 people single-handedly. It's just like, and he's automatically guilty because of the charges. I was just going to say, I mean, the Oracle in the comments section asked a really important question. He said, or his question is, how can we get that kind of abundance when folks are not willing to put in the mental and physical energy required to create such a situation? I believe even if we put in the mental and physical energy required to create such a solution, we won't have that level of abundance. And I can see where he's coming from, that in many ways, we as humans, we turn resources into, so we create extra productive capacity. We take previously, what was deemed to be useless, and now it's useful again. So whether it's household refuse that we now use to manufacture, some car or something. But I don't foresee that benefiting the species as a whole. I don't think we can innovate quickly enough versus the amounts that we're using and the amounts of people that are being born. So very, very drastic things would need to happen. But somebody's asked you, Nico, do you know Steve Hoker and his one man for every woman at government gunpoint? Can you kind of explain that a little bit? Because it's the first time I'm coming across that.
So I released a video recently about that, about the opinions of that guy, and I called it "Returning to Traditionalism is Returning to Male Exploitation," something like that. I mean, Steve Hocker is under the opinion that if we are to be happy as men, then we need to have a woman assigned to us, every man one woman, and things will naturally return to normal. And it needs to be made unlawful I guess in a way, to be single and not committed to that one woman. Now, I don't understand how male disposability escapes people like that. And when we envision traditionalism, we forget how bad the situation was for men beforehand. Right now, I see traditionalism personally as bad as feminism and the current state of affairs. I think it's actually worse on a number of for a number of reasons. For example, men were dying at exceeding rates back then. People had no ability to, skip a day of work. Everyone had to work for a living, and a woman will simply be sitting at home and waiting for her husband to come back. Now, in the past, the traditional division of labor was useful because there were many things that needed to be done at home. Cooking took ages. There was no such thing as refrigeration. Washing machines were not available. But right now, if we return to traditionalism, it will be one woman sitting at home pressing 5 buttons a day and a man slaving away work for, 60 hours a week. So I don't know how this vision is ideal for people, but I completely disagree with this vision altogether. I think that people should have the ability to choose who they are with and who they stay with and all these things, and there shouldn't be any engagement of the government within people's personal and private lives. That's where my dislike towards government comes from, because the engagement within your personal life and private life, within your bedroom, for example, is not something that a government has any right to intervene with or interfere with. Sure. But yeah, that's my point with it.
For sure. I guess the only way I could even kind of foresee that, the kind of system working. So let's say, for example, we said, okay, look, as a species, we are desperate to get off this planet and to make more efficient use of the resources we have. What we would essentially have to do is to limit hypergamy completely. And maybe the only way to do that is this. So maybe at the age of 18, every guy is allocated a woman by the government, and it's on rotation. So maybe you get a 6 out of 10 today or a 7 out of 10 tomorrow. So then you're regularly having sex. So then men aren't competing with other men for female access, and then guys can simply get along with running civilization. I mean, they would essentially have to be denied the right to vote, the right to own property. We would essentially have to treat them like cattle. And I'm not suggesting that we should do this, not at all. But personally, I don't have the desire to participate in such a social system. But that is essentially what would have to happen.
Yeah, I think that such a system will create a currency where women will be the currency, right? The one with the 10 will be just pimping her out to all the other men.
So let's say it's on rotation. So
I understand, but you have her for a month or a week. Why not pimp her out and get someone's PlayStation, for example? Do you see what I mean?
Only if it's a PlayStation 4. I mean,
exactly. But such systems, I think they're unrealistic, and I think you understand that as well. Now, I don't know what the best way would be for changes in the future, but I only see at least the abolition of marriage as the one valid choice that we have right now, and everything else will need to start and fall into place. I mean, even women have started to suffer with the changes that have occurred, and it's why we have so many anti-feminist women as well that are shouting, I can't get men because of all of you crazy bitches, which seems to be what their talking points are. Not all of them, of course. Karen Strawn, has very valid points, and many others, but it seems to be one of those things. Should we take questions, do you think, from the chat, since they're just sitting there and not doing very much?
In fact, I was just going to say, I mean, one of the commentators, and this is why actually I was so keen for us to have this discussion, Vasily Stanislav. I mean, the guy's written repeatedly. He said he wants a war. He literally wants a war.
I haven't paid attention to him, but let's block him. Right. So that's that.
Vasily, I don't know if you've been listening to our discussion, but not only is a war morally reprehensible, but we won't benefit as men. I mean, things won't work out well for us, if there's a violent armed conflict.
Absolutely. Do you guys have any questions for us, or should we just wrap up and fuck you guys? I was watching South Park last night, so I think it has really affected me. I was watching, the the classics.
Tourette's, I love it.
Yeah, of course. Well, Cartman has Tourette's, and I fucking love him.
Somebody's asked, CS MGTOW, where is Baba? Why is he not in the Hangout? We haven't heard from him. I don't know. I think probably just very busy.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say he's very busy. I spoke to him recently. He's very busy, and he's working on the book and also working hardcore as well. So that's what's happening with Barbarossa. He's still around. He's still tough and shit and beautiful as always.
Nice. Warhorse wants us to wrap it up and have intercourse with him.
Yeah, I'm willing to do that. I love the beard.
Cool. Well, mate, it's been such a real pleasure. I'm very, very grateful to be on your channel for the first time, mate.
Man, I wanted to do a lot more with you. We can keep doing this hangouts. It's always a pleasure. I mean, personally, we talk all the time anyway. Most of the conversations are not valid for a hangout, I don't think.
They're too extreme.
Yeah, well, too extreme or too weird for people. I think if they take them out of context.
For sure.
Would I interview George Lawlor if I found him? Yes. But I don't know if he's MGTOW or anything like that, or whether he finds me extremely scary or extreme, or the king or queen of a cult or some shit that I heard so far. So I don't know. This is for UCS because he says CS and Nico, and I'm tired. Okay. CS, what do you have to say about gynocentrism surrounding us on all sides? For example, in Sin City, Mar falls in love with Goldie and happily dies to avenge her death and for his failure.
Hollywood, in my opinion, well, I think it's been pointed out, repeatedly within the manosphere, simply portrays the basic drivers of the human ape, which is why we enjoy watching it. It's realistic. And within a lot of men lies a desire to die for the people we love. It's that kind of act of heroism, heroism, and maybe it gives our life meaning. And so for sure, I think these things are very, very destructive, and they're certainly no longer warranted in an advanced industrial civilization. That there may have been a time when male disposability certainly benefited the species, and what we have is a sexually dimorphic psychological adaptation, which is no longer suited to modernity. So yeah.
Do you want to answer YouTube Observer, who spells observer? He's accusing you for working for the dark side.
Yeah, I absolutely do work with Big Pharma. I do things there that I certainly, I guess, couldn't speak about. But in terms of it being the dark side, I guess it depends on what side you stand on. Because I take a paycheck from them, for me they're certainly the light side. But I guess if you're on the receiving end of maybe some of the more destructive parts of the industry, then it would be the dark side, sure.
Romer is asking, who should be the leader of the new society in the case the next war causes destruction and the only people left over are MGTOW?
Messenger, Nico, Messenger, and Warhorse.
No, man, I highly doubt that such a thing is a possibility. I think we will be the first ones to go because we'll be like, war, fuck that shit, and we'll be dead within a minute's notice. I think if war was to break out, the toughest man would be king or whatever, right, the ruler. But it's a hypothetical scenario with no basis in anything. So. So single men aren't granted asylum in Canada? What?
I didn't know that. Oh, in fact, somebody told me something to that effect the other day, and I haven't actually found an article about that. Can that person post like a link to such a thing? It would be great to see.
Yeah, I think that's a good video to make.
Oh yeah.
It's your guy Kyria who's made that comment.
Okay.
What are our thoughts on creating a MGTOW city starting with Japan as a building model?
What do you think? Can it work?
I think we're a very multinational small group that we can run an. Oh God, I can't believe I'm sharing my ridiculous ideas on this. But I think we can run a community with our own currency and everything, and we can share with each other in terms of skill sets and stuff that we're able to do. We're already doing it in terms of helping each other in terms of knowledge and all that stuff. So whether it can that can turn into an economy, a small economy as such, I don't know if it's possible or not.
I don't think it's possible. I mean, to have a functioning economy, you need huge amounts of division of labor and just a huge amount of productive capacity. I just don't think there are enough of us with a varied, enough skill set. I would be very skeptical if this ever forms its own, because I guess that question is asking, can MGTOW become a state? I don't foresee that happening. I guess it is a possibility, or but perhaps a remote one.
I think not a state, but it can form its own small economy, not under one state or anything like that, but with technology such as Bitcoin. I think these things are available for us if we seem to want something like that. But I don't think people care enough for that thing to happen, and our numbers are definitely not sufficient enough to do that. To both of us, you mentioned that after collapse, MGTOW would not have the conditions to exist as it is. What will it morph into? Would it be becoming something more militant, or would it simply vanish?
Personally, I think it'll vanish. I think it will no longer be, acceptable for a man to be unmarried. There'll be huge amounts of distrust. You would see petty warlords pop up. Personally, I don't think it would happen. I mean, what do you think, Nika?
I think even right now, what we represent right now is a threat to governments, etc., because we represent individualism to its extreme and doing what you have to do for yourself. And that means not engaging in wars, not getting involved in anything that, may damage your personal safety or anything like that. And all of these things need to exist for a functioning society. So I think if we are to turn to militant traditionalism, let's say, the MGTOW as it is will not be feasible, because people who declare themselves as MGTOW or remain bachelors or anything like that, they will simply be slayed or killed or whatever. And I don't think anyone will die for the MGTOW cross.
Exactly. Somebody's asked a really, really fascinating question, which I think is very, very important, specifically about cryptocurrency. And I do apologize. I can no longer actually find the gentleman. Okay, it was the Oracle, and he mentioned Reggie Middleton. I know Reggie Middleton's work very, very well because I traded derivatives for a while, and I actually subscribed to his Boom Bust blog. And Reggie's made some excellent predictions in the past. Like he got the Facebook IPO, he got that completely right. He was completely right on the Twitter IPO. He spoke about the hype and froth with the two Morgan banks and the kind of swallowers of Muppetology, as it were. However, this is where I would say that Reggie Middleton's probably wrong on the cryptocurrency. I know he's very, very heavily invested personally in the cryptocurrency, so of course, yeah, he's very, very bullish on them. But I still don't believe, in my opinion, that cryptocurrencies anytime soon will replace, the dollar. As again, for sure, you have the issues of general acceptability that I don't believe will be completely overcome. I mean, these are just my my opinions. I mean, so please don't take these as facts. The issue of divisibility is going to be a huge issue as let's say Bitcoin, rises in price. Again, general acceptability. I believe these are likely insurmountable issues.
I think someone found an article that says that Canada is only allowing 25,000 refugees, no single men, only families, only women, only children.
Fucking hell, that's just full-on misandry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's insane.
I think they're basing it on the recent terrorist attacks and all of that stuff. But yeah, it is sexist, isn't it? I have a feeling that it sounds a bit sexist to me.
For sure.
Anyway, I think we should wrap it up. What do you think?
Oh, for sure. Just somebody just asked a question, which I'm going to answer, just so that this doesn't become a narrative. No, I absolutely do not listen to Alex Jones. I don't. I mean, the guy's a conspiracy theorist. I don't believe in conspiracy theories.
Yeah, and as for the person that asked me about Matt Forney, who the fuck cares about that guy anymore?
Exactly.
Let's just ignore people like him. Let's only focus on the people within the community that are making noise. That's absolute bullshit. It's why I make videos against Sandman every now and then. All right, guys, it's been nice having you here. It's been lovely to have CS here and have such a productive conversation. I hope we have shed some light in some of the aspects, at least. If you have any questions personally for me or for CS, leave it in the comment section. I'm pretty sure someone at some point will answer, but I don't promise anytime soon.
Guys, I was just going to add, just in terms of Matt Forney, the smartest thing that ever came out of Matt Forney's mouth is Russia's dick. I wouldn't take the guy seriously at all.
Absolutely. And on that bombshell, I think it's time to wrap this up, man. It's nice to see you again. And everyone go and subscribe to CS. Brilliant content, a lot better than mine.
I disagree with that. I think your content's excellent, brother.
Trust me, his content is a lot better. Have a look. Excellent videos. The latest one that he produced is an excellent introductory guide to MGTOW as well. And it's maths and logic, so feminists are not going to understand it anyway. So, so you guys take care and see ya.
Thanks, guys.